Hey folks, it's Pat here with our second battle in Let's Play Carriers at War. Let's actually get a carrier fight going here, so we're going to play the Battle of the Coral Sea, which is the very first battle where two carrier groups decided to go at it. Now, notice on this battle we got quite a few Japanese folks here, and then just two on the American side. This battle's really hard to fight. I've done this one a few times. It never turns out the same way twice. And it's difficult because as the Americans were very much so outnumbered in this battle. Now, I'm going to make it a little bit harder on myself actually by just playing as Admiral Fitch. We could control all the land bases too, but in real life, both these guys would be seen as kind of equals. And so as Fitch, I can't really tell Brett what to do, and Brett can't really tell Fitch what to do. We just kind of have to hope that they coordinate and work together a little bit. And so let's hope that our Army air bases actually decide to help us out a little bit. But at the same point in time, we're not necessarily going to rely on them. Now, Admiral Aubrey Fitch wasn't really the commander of this group, this battle. It was actually Frank Jack Fletcher. But Fletcher had this weird habit where he would actually designate somebody the OTC, which stands for Officer in Tactical Command. And in this case, that was Fitch. So Fitch is calling some of the shots, even though he's outranked by somebody else in the task group. But that's okay. We'll control Fitch and we'll see how it goes. Now, let's set up the scenario here a little bit. It's going to throw us into a very different part of the Pacific. This is South Pacific with Australia, the northern coast of Australia right here. This is the Great Barrier Reef. This is New Guinea, and these are the Solomons, and this big chunk of blue stuff here in the middle, that's the Coral Sea. And thus the name of the battle. But anyway, just to set the scenario, so it's about 6 months after Pearl Harbor, and the Japanese have kind of run into a little bit of a conundrum. So they spent the last 6 months tear-assing across the Pacific, kicked the British out of Hong Kong, and then out of Malaysia, and then finally Singapore, kicked the Americans out of the Philippines, forced General MacArthur to run away on a PT boat. And, right now everything's kind of in chaos because the Japanese accomplished every last thing that they set out to do in the war. And at this point in time, the Japanese high command started kind of looking at each other and saying, well, what the hell do we do now? And you have to understand that in the Japanese high command, there was a real rivalry between the Army and the Navy. Every time the Navy pulled something off that was really, really cool, it got a lot of press, and the Emperor was, oh, you guys did a great job. That the Army, it would make the Army look bad, and vice versa. If the Army did something that was really, really good and, was all over the press and, then the Emperor would say, oh, yes, good job for all of you guys too. Then the Army would make it look bad. Then that would make the Navy look bad. And so at this point in the war, they kind of have to have both an Army and a Navy element to every single battle. And this one's no exception. And the reason for that is because neither one of the two sides wants to completely give over command to the other. And neither one of the two sides really wants to share any glory with the other. This is a hell of a way to run a war. But practically speaking, and for us as the Americans, what it means is that Japanese plans are complicated. And this one's fairly complicated as well. So they couldn't really decide what to do. So they said, well, maybe we'll invade Australia. But before we invade Australia, we have to take this place right here, which is a little town called Port Moresby. And this is just on the underbelly of New Guinea. Now, the Japanese were going to try and march an army across New Guinea to come get this. But this right here, this little stretch of jungle right here is probably the most dangerous stretch of jungle in the entire world when it comes to, cholera and malaria and steep mountains and, indigenous folks there who don't like you. And so that wasn't really practical. And so what they decided to do was launch a strike or an invasion fleet out of this place right here, which is Rabaul. And this is a big, big port. It's full of planes and troops and ships. It's just a beehive of Japanese activity. We don't want anything to do with that. But they're going to send an invasion fleet out of here all the way down, kind of thread through these islands or go around the edge, and then come over here and invade. And this is freaking the Australians out because they kind of figured this out. They said, well, they can't invade us if we have this port or this base that's, kind of between us and them. And so if they come after this, that means they're going to invade Australia. And so Australia's like their entire army was in North Africa at this point in time. They asked the British, just like, please give us our army back. And the British were like, no, we're not going to give you your army back. You guys will be fine. And so Australia's kind of freaking out. And of course, the only people they can turn to at this point in time are the Americans. and say, please, please, please come help us. And so the Americans sent a few ships down here because their code breakers had kind of figured out what the Japanese were up to. And we'll talk more about that in the Midway battle. It's actually a really interesting story. But for practical purposes, it means that we're kind of wise to what's going on, both in this scenario and historically. Now, going back to that thing about the Japanese Army and Navy not getting along, the Navy didn't want to just escort Army troops to glory. And so what they decided to do was, well, since we missed the carriers at Pearl Harbor, let's try and bag some of them, shall we? And so they sent some of their heavy carriers down here. Specifically, they sent two, the Shokaku and the Zuikaku, which were Japan's newest carriers, and they're really, really good units. As far as this game goes, we're going to see them a lot in future battles, and hopefully in this battle we can sink a few of them. But the Americans decided, all right, we're going to set a carrier task group down there, and we're going to see if we can actually prevent this, invasion of Port Moresby from happening. And so with Admiral Fitch, we've got basically this many, we've got 5 task groups. 2 of them have carriers. The first one, which is this Minneapolis one, has the aircraft carrier Lexington in it, which is very famous ship, considered a very lucky ship, even though in real life it didn't survive this battle. But it has a big flight group on it. It's very durable. It's very survivable in some respects. It's armored with 6 inches of armor. It's really fast. It can make 33 knots. And finally, we have a little bit of damage control and fire control capabilities in the American ships, as well as some radar. And so that's the Lexington group. And they are right smack in the middle of these 3 groups. It's also the flag group. And so we'll coordinate some of the other groups with their activities. The next one is the USS Yorktown group. The Yorktown is also a very large carrier, pre-war carrier, built originally as a carrier. And unlike the Lexington, it's not quite as heavily armored, but it does have more anti-aircraft. And so we've got a little bit of balance going on between our 2 carriers here in terms of survivability and defensive capability. And so that's good. And then finally, we have a couple heavy cruisers as a separate group here. This is the HMAS Australia, which is actually a British-built cruiser. And then the Hobart, which I think that one's Australian as well. Yeah, it kind of looks kind of British, so I'm going to guess that it's not American-made. But anyway, we've got those 3 groups here. And then finally, we have the Neosho, which is just a tanker group. And that's because this guy came in here and fueled all these guys up historically, and so they're going to book it down to Australia down here. We're just going to let them do that. And then we also have the Tangier, which is a seaplane tender. It's basically a 1-ship task group, and this task group has a squadron of seaplanes. PBY Catalina is attached to it. And so that'll give us a few more eyes in the sky. Oh, man, I keep clicking that X button. I don't want to do that. And so Tangier, we're going to go ahead and send out tons and tons of search planes here. Hopefully they bunch up a few more on each one of those vectors there. If they send them south to New Zealand, that's a waste of a plane. We know the Japanese aren't down there because the map doesn't scroll down there. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Now, we have to think of our strategy here a little bit, because we know the Japanese are coming from here, and they're going to come down here and go over here. And we also know that there's a Japanese carrier task group, the big ones with the Shokaku and the Zuikaku, somewhere up here. So right now the Japanese forces are divided. So there's a couple different options that we have, and let me kind of walk you through the strategy on this one a little bit. We can, of course, go after the large carriers up here. That might be a good idea if we win. I think that if you think of carrier combat's kind of like heavyweight boxing. Your carrier is really powerful, but it's not very durable, and it doesn't have great endurance, okay? But it can really land a punch. And so what happens with carriers is the more you use them, and even if you're successful with all your strikes, you're still going to lose some planes. Some are going to crash on landing and takeoff. Some are going to get shot down. Some of them get, shot down by cap or flak or whatever. And so over time, the more you use your carriers, the weaker your air group gets. And a carrier without an air group is basically a barge. It's a barge worth a lot of victory points. And so we don't want the Japanese to get their hands on it. But at the same point in time, it's useless without its air group. And so your carriers are strongest at the very beginning of the game. And so we could attack, we could try and go after the main Japanese carriers. But the problem is if they lurk around up in here and we go after them by coming around the Solomons here, we're trying to thread our way through, this mess right here, we're pulling ourselves away from the transport fleet. Now, we could do that, or we can go after the transport fleet and whatever's with it at first. That's probably a little bit more prudent. But again, the problem with carriers is that the more that we use them, the weaker they get. And so if we spend a lot of time trying to take out transports or whatever ships are with them over here, by the time Shokaku and Zuikaku come over here, we're basically not going to have the strength to be able to fight them. So we can take this battle one of two ways. And personally, I'm kind of inclined to go after the transport fleet just because if we turn that back, they lose the battle strategically. Now, we might lose it tactically, and that would be a historical outcome. But again, if we can actually preserve enough of our strength to at least force the Shokaku and the Zuikaku to maybe chase us down here so that they can get in range of some of these army bombers, we might be able to even the odds on them a little bit. And so that's kind of my thinking right now. And we'll just have to see how the battle develops to see if it actually goes that way or not. But regardless of that, let's go ahead and we're going to use like the first day to kind of steam this way as much as we can. So if we position ourselves in a spot over here, we've got quite a bit of fuel because these guys just got topped off. And so let's just pour on a little bit of gas for each one of these guys. Get over there as much as we can. That way we can keep some of these guys at arm's length. And we'll have the Yorktown bunch up with the Lexington here. And we'll also be able to stay out of range of most of the land-based bombers up in here. As long as we don't get too far up into this area right here, which we might do at one point in time, just to chase them back up into Rabaul. But we'll be subject to land-based air attacks at that point in time, and that might not be a good idea. But these three groups, we're going to have them all kind of bunch up for now. And then we'll just run it and see exactly where they show up in the morning. Check the weather here real quick. Draw our bad weather. Yeah, we got a couple little, little scraps of storms right here. Storms become really, really important at this point in time in the game because they serve both as your cloak and your blindfold. If we're having trouble spotting Japanese task groups, it's probably because they're hiding out in storms. But if we manage to actually hide around storms, then they'll have trouble spotting us too. So you kind of give some, take some. But anyway, carrier combat is, like I said before, it's really, really brutal and it goes really, really fast. You have to be careful, just like in a heavyweight boxing match, because if they land one or two heavy punches on you in the beginning, you're basically done. And our objective is to, make sure that Port Moresby is actually in good shape and that we can actually do something against that transport fleet, get it to turn back or whatnot. And then preserve our strength, because if Shokaku and Zuikaku come over here after we've been fighting with this group, we might have a tough time with them. But even if we lose a couple carriers, well, I hope we don't lose our carriers. But as long as Port Moresby is safe, Australia can sleep sound at the end of the day. And we can move on to the next battle, which will be Midway. And this battle is really, really hard. We are badly outnumbered. Our planes are not as good as the Japanese, with maybe the exception of the Dauntless Dive Bomber, which will be kind of our workhorse from our carriers here. We don't have very heavy surface units, so we can't, hope to engage in too much surface combat. But at the same point in time, we can definitely make the Japanese earn whatever they're going to try and do here. So right now it's set to break whenever we spot a new task group. You just select whichever one of these you want. Right now it's already set. So if our search planes actually do spy something, this little panel right here will light up, and we'll have a pretty good idea of what's going on. Let's take a look. So we're already launching some Dauntlesses on search missions. We could throw up some cap, but to be really honest with you, the Japanese are pretty far away so far. If they get a little closer, we'll throw some cap up, but right now we'll just keep our pilots kind of resting in their bunks and try and prevent any accidents from happening, because this game, every plane is modeled, and so even when it's trying to land, there's a chance that it'll crash. When it's trying to take off, there's a chance that it'll crash. When you're gassing it up, there's a chance that it'll crash. So we'll just kind of leave our ships alone. Look like they already spotted us. And it looks like we spotted something. Let's go see what that is, shall we? So anyway, this right here, this little plus is a sighting, and these are notoriously inaccurate. Search plane from the Yorktown spotted 2 capital ships at 8:50, so just right now. Radioed that in. Clear weather, and we'll just have to let them shadow them a little bit and see what's going on. My guess is the Japanese large carriers are probably up in here. Sometimes they'll snoop around this way, sometimes they'll sneak around this way, and sometimes they'll just thread their way through this stuff to come get you if you threaten their transport fleet, which is exactly what we have in mind. But let's just go ahead and run this for a bit. See if we get a couple updates on that. Now, there's another little Japanese carrier coming with the transport fleet. If we could find that and wipe it out, that'd be pretty good too. Whoa, these guys are close. I wonder what that is. So that's probably a surface group. Notice that it's had 4 reports on it, and you can go to the previous report and kind of compare the two to kind of see. I'm pretty sure we got one plane from the Lexington, or that's just the same plane from the Lexington following those guys. So we can be relatively sure that this is some kind of surface group. But this one over here is a little bit interesting. Wow, is that their transport fleet? Huh. Oh my God, if they actually led with their transport fleet. I mean, shooting transports with carrier planes is kind of like really unfair. This is basically going to be target practice. Let's book it on over there and see if we can actually make that happen. Because that would be a rare opportunity for us. Now, they're still a little bit out of range here. Probably. We can go into the strike screen and actually tell exactly how far they are. So right now, naval sightings. This one's 260 miles away. An auxiliary force of 4 ships. 260 miles away, sorry, let me click the strike screen here again. If we accept that target, the only thing we could send is our dauntlesses, which would be good, unless that little baby carrier's spooking around there somewhere. So we can't launch any fighter cover with those guys until they're 180 miles away. But it's still really early in the day, so tell you what, let's just go ahead and run this for an hour or two here. And we might be able to get close enough to actually punch those guys, if that's what that is. Notice that we got a radar warning here, and that's because the Japanese have some planes in store for General Brett. That's okay. We don't really care about that. Let's see if we're closing the distance on this at all. 260 miles still. And let's check out that sighting. If we've had a couple updates on that, it's still showing that with 2 reports. Dang, that might be their transport fleet. God, if that's their transport fleet, they probably don't have any fighter cover. Wow, we could do something really ballsy here and just hit them. You know what? Let's run it one more hour, close the distance just a little bit. Okay, so here they are bombing Port Moresby with Betty bombers, the freaking ugliest bomber that was ever created in the history of mankind. This picture actually does it quite a bit of justice. I think this picture is probably prettier than the actual picture of a Betty bomber. So go Google it at some point in time. You'll see what I mean. It is just absolute. Oh, here's another sighting. What is this? God, that's got to be their transport fleet. And look at this. We got some carriers right here. I bet you that's that baby flat top. You know, he's far enough away from that guy that if we struck with our bombers, he probably wouldn't get any cap up there. And that way we could keep our fighters here in case he decided to strike us. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So Yorktown's going to throw up some cap, or Lexington's going to throw up some cap. Yorktown's going to throw up some cap, because we got Wildcats. Those are pretty good. And then let's go ahead and let's launch our Dauntlesses at this guy right here. 300 miles. This guy's got a range of 310, normal range. Let's just go ahead and do this, shall we? If we can blow up a few transports, it's basically going to be target practice for us. But if we can if we can take a chunk out of their transport fleet right off the bat. Let's just close this distance, try and keep that carrier away from us, but this auxiliary is not going to be able to move as fast as we can, so we should be able to run it down. And this way, if they do decide to actually send some planes down to our carriers from their baby carrier, we'll have our cap up and ready. Let's wait till these planes actually launch, and then we'll throw up a little bit more cap. Now we're getting closer. Oh, come on, man, launch. What's wrong with you guys? Okay, they're taking off. All right, so see there, I'll take off. There's none left in the hangar there. Let's go ahead and throw every one of our fighters up on cap, just in case he decides to show up. This would be normal cap, where they kind of rotate in and out. You know, they'll fly for a couple hours and link flights of 4 or 5. But if we can get some hits, there they go. Finally, off they go. Yeah, blow up some transports. Then, you know, they're not going to make it back in time tonight to actually hit that carrier. Oh my God, where did he go? He just like ducked it way over here. Man, whoever that search plane pilot is, you're fired. That is a lot further than you said it was. See if they can actually find their targets. Come on, guys. Come on. Come on, get them. See, a couple of them had to abort, but yes, we've got transports here with perfectly good dauntlesses. Come on. Yeah. Like I said, this is a turkey shoot. Transports are not going to be able to take too many hits. Oh, this one is just roasting. They're not going to have the same level of damage control or survivability as a warship, and so if we could put some. Come on, man, guys, pick a different target. This one's already done. Come on, come on, come on, come on. There's got to be more there. Don't be wasting bombs by dropping them in the sea next to this thing. Come on. Come on, I know it's target practice, and none of you have taken a single bullet hole. This guy took a couple bullet holes right there. Come on, guys, I'm happy that you're blowing up this transport, but there are more there. Please go find some of them. There we go. Okay, that's a light cruiser. Might as well put some bombs on that, whatever. So, come on, boys. I think those other 2 squadrons had to come back. Come on, man. I want to dish out medals tonight. So, a lot more medals than what you're telling me that you deserve. Let's run it a little bit more, see if our strike... Come on, leave the light cruiser alone. Go after the transports. Ah, you jerks. Alright, whatever. Maybe we'll get a few more. No, looks like they're going to have to come back. Let's go ahead and run this till dusk. It'll be dark here in a couple hours, so at least this way we'll get all our planes back. And we'll be in good position to actually do some damage tomorrow. Hopefully that one transport at least is done. Maybe that'll make them think twice. This is a long battle. It's got 8 days left to run, and so the more of our strength we can preserve, the better off we'll be. And there they go, going back to the Lexington there. Why did my task groups get off station? Probably because they were never matched in terms of speed, which would have been my fault. So yeah, Yorktown's way down here. What we need to do is we need to change this guy's heading. And let's just try and keep it pretty close here. Reduce speed quite a bit. And that way, these guys will form back up tonight. And we'll be in good position tomorrow. We never did spy anything else out here. It's dark now, so hopefully that means they are pretty far away. But with that being said, that's the first day of our Coral Sea battle. It hasn't worked out too well for us so far. I was really hoping that we could get a few more bombs on those transports there, but maybe it's just not in the cards. We'll have to see how the next day or two goes, because my guess is that we're going to have some pretty intense combat here pretty quick. So I hope to see you there. Take care now.